There's a moment, a quiet yet piercing sliver of time, when someone looks you in the eye and calls your name. Not the name you were given, but the name they assign you. Arrogant, manipulative, selfish, cold. And in that exact moment, your instincts spark, your pulse quickens, your mind races to defend, to explain, to prove yourself right and them wrong. The average person gives in to this impulse, trained, conditioned, molded to believe that innocence must be declared, that truth must be proven. "You misunderstood me," they say. "That's not what I meant." Or worse, "I'm not like that." But this very act of defense is the mistake Machiavelli warned us about. Because in defending yourself, you're not just clarifying, you're conceding. You're admitting, subconsciously, emotionally, and publicly, that there might be merit in the accusation, that you are weak enough to need defending. In the game of perception, weakness isn't forgiven. It's hunted. It's dissected. And in power games, perception isn't just important, it's everything. Defend yourself, and you show the world your wound. Don't, and the world begins to question if you're even capable of being wounded. That's the true brutality Machiavelli understood. The second you respond, you've already given your enemies the victory. Silence, on the other hand, commands. It disturbs. It forces the crowd, the accuser, the audience to project onto you. And in that projection, you become something greater than a person. You become a myth. The man who remains silent forces the world to wonder, forces the crowd to defend him because he never stooped low enough to defend himself. To defend is to play their game. It means agreeing to their framing, acknowledging their perspective, bowing, ever so slightly, to their authority. And in that bow, however small, you give them the narrative. Even if you're right, even if your intent was pure, your values sound, your words honest. Defending yourself frames you as weak, because only the weak need to explain. The strong, they let silence speak. They let stillness become their armor. They allow the accusation to wither in the air, unanswered, unacknowledged, and eventually irrelevant. It's not that they don't care. It's that they've transcended the need to show they care. That's power. The need to be understood is human, yes, but in Machiavellian terms, it's also a liability. When you explain, you crave clarity. But clarity is therapy, not strategy. Strategy seeks control, and control never comes from vulnerability. It comes from ambiguity. A man who is understood can be manipulated. A man who is feared cannot. When accused of arrogance, manipulation, coldness, if your reaction is to clarify, to explain, to prove your humanity, you've already lost. You've given them your pulse. You've shown your heartbeat. The powerful don't bleed. They don't react. They don't even flinch. Instead, they stare. They remain still. They let the room feel the silence like thunder. Because it's not about the accusation. It's about your response. And silence, true silence, not born of fear, but of control, is the most deafening response of all. Think about the most powerful people you've ever met. Were they loud? Were they desperate to be liked? Did they jump to explain every misunderstood moment? Or were they composed, unreadable, still? Did their silence make you question yourself? That's the power of restraint. Machiavelli said, "He who explains submits, but he who remains silent forces the world to guess. and they often guess too highly. They assume mystery equals mastery, and that assumption is worth more than any defense you could ever speak. Because when you don't respond, the accuser begins to doubt themselves. They wonder if they overstepped. They feel exposed. Their words echo unanswered, and in that void, their power crumbles. They look emotional. They look desperate. And you look above it all. That's how you flip power. Not by retaliating, but by holding your ground so completely that their attack burns itself out. You walk into a room. Someone takes a jab at your intelligence, your confidence, your past. The crowd looks at you, waiting. Here's what you do. Nothing. No flinch, no glare, no words. Just complete stillness. The crowd doesn't focus on the insult. They focus on your reaction. And when that reaction is calm, detached, unreadable, they question the accuser. They wonder what you know that they don't. You don't just survive the attack, you elevate beyond it. And if you must speak, let your words be few, surgical, and dismissive. Someone calls you manipulative? Smile, not with smugness but serenity, and say, if that's how you see it. Not in defense, not in anger, but in detachment. That one sentence does what 10 explanations never could. It flips the energy. Now they feel exposed. They expected a fight. Instead, they're met with indifference. And that indifference, that is power. The room begins to shift. People no longer see you as the target. They see you as the judge. That's the cold calculus Machiavelli understood. That power lies not in being liked, but in being feared. Not in being clear, but in being unreadable. Not in explaining, but in being untouchable. And the untouchable don't clarify. They don't apologize. They don't defend. They stand, composed, and let the world turn around them. In relationships, business, public life, this principle applies. When challenged emotionally, the average person panics. They explain, justify, overcorrect, and in doing so, they validate the emotional frame of the accuser. But the strategic man, he doesn't get pulled into that orbit. He lets the accusation hang. He lets the silence do its work. Then, with surgical calm, he might say, "That's not how I see it. That's all. Nothing more. No justification, no elaboration, just calm detachment." And suddenly, the accuser feels unstable. They question their own tone. They feel dramatic. You held the emotional tempo, and whoever controls the tempo controls the frame. In some cases, the best move isn't even to speak, it's to vanish. Let them sit in the silence of being ignored. Don't block. Don't respond. Don't even acknowledge. Let your absence be the mirror in which they see themselves unravel. Most people need validation, even in conflict. Remove that, and you remove their oxygen. They escalate. They spiral. They grasp at shadows, and you remain still. That's not indifference. That's immunity, and immunity is rarer than strength. Strength fights. Immunity doesn't need to. That's the pinnacle. That's the ideal. Because when you're immune to attack, you don't just survive, you dominate. Someone says you're arrogant. Strange how confidence triggers insecurity. They say you're fake. People say that when they stop getting what they want. You don't deny. You don't defend. You reflect their insecurity back at them. Now they're defending themselves. You used their energy against them. That's power judo. That's the turn of the blade. Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to block the sword. He'd tell you to let them fall on it. You don't just walk away from the accusation. You leave them bleeding from their own strike. The world says defend your name. Machiavelli says never chase innocence. The man who explains appears guilty. The man who stays silent appears above it. And the man who makes others defend him, he becomes legendary. Because over time, the world stops accusing and starts respecting, not because you proved them wrong, but because they feared what would happen if they kept testing you. Fear is the foundation of respect, and that fear is born from unpredictability. When you don't react the way they expect, when you stay silent when they expect outrage, they become cautious. They wonder what you'll do next. They tread lightly. They self-censor. And in that space, your power grows. That's not reputation. That's aura. The final form. Not silence as defense, but as dominance. Not stillness as passivity, but as presence. The untouchable don't just avoid being hurt. They redefine what it means to be attacked. Because in the end, Machiavelli knew the man who never defends isn't defending because he's weak. He's not defending because he's already won. And here's the twist. The end that shocks even those who thought they knew how power works. The true game isn't to win arguments, silence critics, or prove your side. It's to reach a level where people stop trying to challenge you at all, where your stillness isn't absence, it's command. And every move you don't make terrifies them more than the ones you do. That's not defense. That's domination. That's not reaction. That's reign. That's not silence. That's strategy. And it wins before the battle even begins.